everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are on episode 3 of Frieren Beyond Journey's End. Oh my gosh, this series, it's so peaceful, tranquil. It may not be like that the entire time because, you know, there's that little imp in the OP, and then they've been fighting a demon king before in the past. So, I mean, I'm sure magical journeys will abound, but I really like this series because of how kind of tranquil and peaceful it is. It's traversing through these ideas and themes in this very kind of calm way, and it takes its time, and I really like that about it. So compared to a lot more faster paced stories that I've been watching on my channel, this is like very refreshing. So I appreciate that. And I like Frieren a lot. She's really great. I like Fern a lot. She's wonderful. And I'm excited to see what kind of journeys they get into, because you have this very old elf and this very young mage, and them kind of learning from each other while teaching each other it's very nice to see. So I do have a couple comments before we start this episode, though, and dive in. Matthew Brimmer pointed out that Frieren's voice actress is, among other shows, Anya from Spy Family, which baffled me. My mind would just absolutely just imploded upon itself. Because I was like, what? Because their voices sound nothing alike. It is completely not what I imagined at all. I was like, oh, what? And I know that voice actress has done a lot of various roles. She's definitely not typecast, so that's really cool. So I'm glad to know that as well. There were a couple other voice actors I think were mentioned, but I'm sure they'll come up later in this series. But Alessia Colley also pointed out that there were some German words that had some definitions that I know Frieren obviously is freeze and flamme is flame, because that seems rather obvious. But there's also a Latin word. This Oriole means halo. I was like, okay. Himmel means sky or heaven, which that should have been foreshadowing from the get-go that his name means heaven, because he gonna die in the first episode. And she always looks up to the sky and thinks of Himmel. And so, yeah, also, for as vain as Himmel could kind of be in the flashbacks, his name meaning heaven, I'm sure at no point he was like, you know, my name means heaven, Frieren. Which is pretty accurate. I just picture him doing that and Frieren being like, get away from me. So that's really great. I love that. Eisen means iron. Makes sense. And a heater means cheerful, bright, or serene, but it could also be used to mean a drunk person. A drunk person, which makes the most sense. Apparently there's a phrase, angeheitert, that means a mildly drunk person. And I was like, okay. So that's, if I'm glad I didn't know German, because if I did know German, hearing these character names would give a little bit away about their character, and it'd be like, oh, okay. Strahl also means beam or ray, in reference to the city of Strahl that they've been at. And then when I was thinking of Fern, I was thinking of the plant fern, but apparently fern also means far away. And I was like, oh, and that name itself covers a whole manner of things, like the idea of her being quiet and seeming distant because you didn't notice her, the idea that she, you know, in episode 2 is afraid she's not going to become a mage in time for heater, like all of those. I was like, oh, like her name has such a layered meaning to it. And I was like, and I just thought it was a plant. So that's really good. So Alessia, thank you. And then Uig, of course, means eternally or forever, which is ironic because we find out that there are no magical spells for eternal life in that book itself by them. So fun times. But yeah, I really like that. I did get a spoiler that this episode and the next episode, the first 4 episodes, are all part of one episode. And that doesn't seem like a spoiler. I know some people were like, why would you consider that a spoiler? I'm like, well, one, I don't want to know anything about the production of the series. I don't want to know anything about like, oh, this is meant to be a 2-parter, or you should watch this together. Because what it does is, as a reactor, now I know this is technically part 3 of 4. There's not really any stakes, because I'm like, if something scary happens, oh well, it's part part of a 4-part, it's meant to be one episode split into 4 chunks. So there's not going to be a cliffhanger, or if there is, it's probably of no consequence because the next episode was supposed to come after it. And it just gives me a preconceived notion as a reactor, and my brain starts to go into overdrive, and I kind of start clicking things and figuring things out before they happen. And I don't want to do that. I want to be surprised by the story. And so the less information I get, the better. That's honestly, I tell people all the time on my channel, I'm like, the less information you give me, the better. Now, after the fact, like after we've introduced to a character and then you tell me the voice actor, cool. Or after something happens and you're like, oh, did you know production-wise this had to do with this? After the fact, I would love to know, but I just don't want to know beforehand, so I can experience the series, go in blind, and then come out, you know, with a better, more rich appreciation of it. So that's pretty much it. But yeah, so I'm really excited. I want to give a really quick shout out over to our philanthropy tier over on Patreon, because they have been really super supportive and kind, and everybody on Discord has been really nice. I will go ahead and say that episode 2, you probably noticed, is back to my old format on the channel. I talked to Terminus, who is another reactor of Frieren, and they said they had a lot of trouble doing the in-video reactions up through episode 10. And I was like, and I just don't have time to like make the edits and then it get copyright struck or stuff after the fact. So I think what I will do is, lessons learned, I'm going to keep my old format up to episode 10 and then try it again and see if we can do like episode 1 at that point for you all. So we'll just see. Work in progress. And with other series, I'll probably try it out and see what happens there. It's a work in progress, but we'll just have to see, right? We'll just have to see. So in any case, I'm really excited. My dogs. I want to give a shout out to our philanthropy tier over on Patreon, specifically to Alex Cornejo, to Anime Annie, to Anna, to Be Happy, to Dana, to Danger Zone, as well as Destiny Marie, Eric, Kiri, Loisaji, Lyndon, Matthew Palfiniere, Nameless Monster, Shimoyama, Sunspots, Trails, and Translucent Men. Thank you all so much for your support. I greatly appreciate it. All of my love. So yeah, I'm really excited. I hope you all are too, but we've talked enough. Like I said, I'm not, somebody was like, oh, I've listened to the OP and ED lyrics. And I was like, I don't want to know anything about them. I like waiting till the end of a core or the end of a series to really look at the lyrics, because then you kind of get an overall view of the series as a whole. And I want to wait and do that. So we'll just have to see. But we're going to look at episode 3 of Frieren, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Aww. This episode is so cute. Oh, cute. But also, Frieren is not to be underestimated because she can kill things. So there's that. This episode is really neat. And neat in a very intriguing way of, it kind of like the first half I was sitting there going, I really like this. It's cute. It's really adorable, but I don't know what I'm going to talk about in the discussion. And then we get the second half and I'm like, okay, good. Now we have things to talk about, because there's a lot that happens kind of very subtly. I really like how subtle this show is, and it just takes its time and slowly like meanders you through this little maze. And it's almost like you're discovering things as Frieren's been discovering them the whole time. And it's really, really well done. And I like that a lot. So let's talk about this episode. About her. I feel like last week I kind of rushed through the discussion, so I want to take some time and kind of go through it here. I really felt like I wanted the Pirates of the Caribbean playing in the background as these ships approach. It's interesting that we're in this harbor town. I kept thinking personally, I don't know when the axe guy is showing up. I'm assuming it's going to be after episode 4, because again, this is all 1 through 4 is chunked together. So I doubt we're going to meet the red-haired guy until after episode 4, because this is just the introductory episode with Fern and Frieren. But I kept thinking maybe the red-haired guy, we'd see him like come off the boat or something and get a preview. But if he's tied with Ison in the OP, then there's a good chance we won't see him until we get to like the mountains or caves or something. Dwarves are usually in mountains. If J.R.R. Tolkien has taught us anything, they're not on ships. So we'll just have to see about that. But the animation, again, the backgrounds, the setting, it's beautiful. I feel like setting does a lot for this series. When we study literature, there are 7 elements of fiction. You have your setting, your plot, your characters, your point of view, you have your theme, you have your symbolism, and you have your style. And style and setting are really done well in this series. Everything feels lived in. Everything feels very... Somebody was commenting that episode 1 of the capitals seemed very abandoned, and I didn't notice that till they pointed it out, and then I was like, But it could be they were at a festival or something, or they all just got drunk the night before and slept in. I went to Wisconsin once. I went to Milwaukee, Wisconsin once, and there's no places that open to serve you food till like 11 a.m. I'm like, are y'all hung over the next day? Is that why? I just, maybe this was the Milwaukee of the elven fantasy world here. That was it. I swear, no restaurants in Milwaukee open before 11. They do not believe in breakfast. They're like, no. Only brunch. And then you get mimosas and it's hair of the dog and we go from there. But I just love how these worlds, they feel very lived in. They feel like you could just walk up and just enter it, right? And it's so cool. I love that. It's very nonchalant how it does it. It's effortless, right? So I also like how Fern is taller than Frieren. I like that a lot too, which Frieren's pretty short to begin with. But here's the thing. I get from Frieren, and I am, to my knowledge, not this, so I'm not really the voice to talk about this, but I was trying, it didn't hit me in the first or second episode, but watching this episode and the idea that Frieren, even after being told about people, even after knowing she needs to try to get to know people, she's still not very good at it. And it's not just the fact that it's been so long. I get kind of this sort of neurodivergent vibe from Frieren, and I'm not technically neurodivergent myself, so I'm not really a voice to speak on it, but just some of kind of the social things that she gets it. You can tell that she gets it, but her way of remembering and her way of expressing it, it's like there's an inhibitor there and she just can't get past that wall, and she's trying her hardest, and she tries so hard to get Fern the gift in this episode, and you're like, yes, but it almost feels like there's just something like just blocking her from getting there, and she's like, I can't do it. Why can't I do it? Because you can see in her mind that she wants to do this, but she she understands and is self-aware that she doesn't get it, and she doesn't know how to get it. So there's just kind of that neurodivergence there that just seems present. And before in episodes 1 and 2, I just felt like she wasn't thinking about humanity and mortality because she was kind of above it. But this episode shows she's trying. She's just not as successful with it as maybe she wants to be. And that's something, right? I feel like that's so intriguing that she is trying. And she was the most expressive in this first part of the episode that we've ever seen her, where she was just like, she didn't know what to do. She was like, I don't know. And then she was just like looking around, like looking suspicious. It's so fascinating because the one moment where she's trying to understand humanity and she's trying to match it is the most expressive that she's ever been in this series. And then when we go back to her being in, mage mode, she kind of like just gets back in her element. And it's funny, she normally, what you think of is that when people are out of their element, they get more anxious and they just like, but in her case, it's her like it's not like when she's confronted with something that would be out of our element normally for us, she can handle it with this calm, cool composure. But then when it's something simple like, oh, just find a place to eat for dinner, she's like, I don't know what to do. So it's fascinating. I love it. I also like that twice in this episode, there's a moment where she is trying to hide something from Fern and she goes into the shadows. And that just symbolically was a really nice little touch in the episode. I like that. And Fern is not dumb. Fern's like, oh, I'm going to eavesdrop and follow you around and figure out what you're doing. There was one moment where she's like dragging along like the bullhead. I'm like, you just in the last episode made this dragon horn magically disappear with your magic to get summoned away. Why didn't you do that with a bullhead? I'm sure there was a reason, though. I'm sure she had a reason. But yeah, and she wants Fern to read this book on magical history. She's like, you need to study. It's important. And we find out from this episode that Fern should have been studying. Because there's a lot talked about that Fern was not privy to. Right? But I like this. I love Fern's face of her like little badger face. I did not know what to expect out of Frieren's adventures as she's going. I did not know what to expect out of it. At first, I thought that maybe she was getting the jewelry for like a patron. She was going to trade the jewelry for a spell. Like some guy sent her shopping for his wife for their anniversary or something. And she was like, I don't know what to get her. I thought it could be that. I thought maybe she was getting like a certain piece of jewelry that Himmel would have wanted on his grave or something. And she was going to put it on a memorial stone there in town. Something like that. Because Himmel has had an impact everywhere he's gone. The reason they say 27 years after Himmel the hero has passed is it's getting more and more meaning to it. Like we're just seeing how much of an impact Himmel had on the villages and the cities that they visit, right? Which is hilarious because, yeah, Himmel did things. He saved people, but Frieren did a lot. But people don't necessarily remember her because she didn't build those connections. The fact that Himmel came back to the one city to check on the seal year after year after year shows he had that commitment to the people that he protected, whereas Frieren just kind of like said, okay, thanks, peace out, you don't need me, and was forgotten. So, and I like that Frieren isn't trying, she's just trying to go from city to city to make sure people remember Himmel, and that she herself can remember those steps before they fade away completely. Because, yeah, that's kind of the thing. It's been 80 years since they fought whatever beast that was. A lot of the actions that Himmel had done are, in the fading consciousness of the people that were alive during that time. So a lot of people aren't alive still that would remember their actions. So she almost seems like she's trying to keep his legacy and keep his heroic actions alive, by word of mouth to all these people. So that's interesting too. But I like Fern walking around with the cat trying to figure out what she's doing. I love that Frieren is not a morning person. It's hilarious. I love that little character building too. And that's another thing that kind of leads me to the whole neurodivergence thing. Not that people that are neurodivergent are not morning people. I'm not saying that. But I'm just saying that she is capable of showcasing these emotions. She gets grumpy, in the morning. She looks flustered. She gets flustered when she tries to get the gift. She has these emotions she's capable of showing, which this episode depicts to us, but she just has trouble figuring out when the emotion applies to what's seen. And it's like kind of like, how should I feel about this, right? And I compared her to Shi Lian from Heaven Official's Blessing at the beginning of this, but I wouldn't describe Shi Lian as neurodivergent. I wouldn't. He's a cinnamon bun, but he is he's very capable of expressing the emotions that he's feeling at the time. She seems like she just kind of hits a wall and doesn't exactly know what, she's like, I don't know what to do with my hands sort of situation. And I love that that's where Fern comes in, because Fern is very hyper aware of how to respond emotionally to a situation that's given to her. And so her emotions and how she responds sort of match what we expect Frieren to have. So that's interesting. And I think that the author can also get away with it too, because Frieren is an elf who's lived however long. So knowing like expressing emotions, it's like you're literally nearly immortal. How do you react to something? It's just another day, right? Like the one mage says, like the corrupt sage says, he's like, this is just a drop in the bucket to us, right? I definitely, when she went to a poor Frieren trying to figure out she did good picking out the hair barrette. That's what I'm wearing a necklace now, but I don't wear a lot of jewelry. If my hair was longer, a hair barrette would be the way to go. But I'm usually like an earrings person. I don't wear earrings a lot, but if I was going to wear any jewelry, it'd be earrings. But I feel like people that wear jewelry have that like one type that they're all about. For Fern, the hair clip is the most practical because it'll keep her hair out of her face when she's casting spells. So good on you, Frieren, for picking the right one, right? And I just like how tender and soft this moment is. And honestly, her going into the tavern, the basement of the tavern, to find out where the best place to eat is. I like it kind of subverts her expectations because it's this like seedy underbelly and you think these guys are going to pick a fight with her, which after the end of this episode, it's probably good they didn't pick a fight with her. But I like that she's not really deterred by any of them. She's like, where do I need to go eat at? And they're like, oh, well, just up the road here, ma'am. It's like this, it's literally the scene from Tangled where Flynn is like, I have a dream. And like they go to the tavern and sing the little song. Literally that. But then she takes her out to the top of the city to like go out to eat. And it's absolutely beautiful. I love it. Like I instantly, the moment we saw like the lighthouse, the sun across the water as it's setting, I was like, I want to go there. I want to be there right now eating at that table. That looks like a dream. Why can I not be there? Like that's just kind of that's sort of the vibe this show gives you, is it makes you want to be there. It makes you want to go to that place and inhabit it because of just how lush and beautiful and vibrant it is. It feels so lived in, and I love it. But yeah, and so then she's like, look, I'm sorry, you can choose whatever you like. And so she's like, can we afford it? And she's like, oh, I've been saving up. And then she asks Frieren what she'll have. And she's like, well, today. And then Fern's like, oh, you'll have Merker pudding, won't you? And Frieren's like, well, how did you know? And so then we see back, we have Ison eating grapes. Of course, Hyder drinks the alcohol. And then we see Himmel eating the omelet. And he's like, you want the Merker pudding today. Like he's been observant. He's been watching her. And again, what's so sad about this is that poor Himmel, he's like, well, I'll just tell you all about me so that you'll know. And she's like, I don't know anything about you all. And he's like, well, I'll try harder to teach you about myself. And I have no doubt that they told her about them and that she learned. But again, it's like something just doesn't process with her to either remember it or to like make it to be that is something she should remember or hold on to. It seems like she has trouble placing those things and understanding what she should hold on to and what she can let go memory-wise about, the people from her past. Also, can I just say, this is like, this whole series is like a shipper's nightmare. And I mean that in the best way possible. But it is a shipper's nightmare. You want to know why? Because this whole entire time, I want to ship Himmel and Frieren so badly. I want to ship them so badly. But you know what? I can't because he's dead. And he died without... She doesn't believe that... Here's the thing that's so frustrating is that he's dead. But the thing about it is sometimes when you have narratives where the one character's died and the other character's lived on, you can go back and they reminisce and they're like, oh, well, we were in love, before he passed. And here's all these moments where we were in love and just... She didn't have that with him because she didn't realize until it was too late. It didn't all click for her. And it's like... So part of her world tour of going back through all these places that she went with this crew is trying to relive all these moments with Himmel and re-encounter them and realize what she should have maybe been expressing or feeling in that moment. And we, the audience, get to see that. But it's such a nightmare for shipping because you can't ship them because he's dead. There's no way they can get together after all this, right? It's not like he just went away and she's retracing her steps and then he's going to like pop up on top of the hill and be like, I'm actually alive and I'm hot again. And she's like, oh my gosh. No, it's not going to happen. He's dead. All we can do is just like, it's the most peaceful angst that you've ever imagined because you can't do anything about it. Now she's just reliving these memories and trying to go back and, it's like a big woulda, coulda, but it is hard. It's so hard. Like, I love them and want to ship them so badly, and I'm like, girl, I feel for you. You don't know what it's got till it's gone, right? Oh, it hurts. It's painful. But yeah, and then she gets the pudding, of course. And then she's like, well, why are you apologizing? I'm with Fern. I would have got them short stacks with the strawberries and blackberries on it. And then Frieren says, I don't know anything about you, so I don't know what you like. And that's kind of the crazy thing, too, is, again, Frieren has been around Fern, just Fern, for how long now? She's been around her for years, and by herself with Fern for at least a year. So, I mean, she got to know Fern when she was, what, 8 or 9, 10? It's been, what, 6 years, 6 or 7 years? And she says she doesn't know anything about her. I'm like, how have you not picked up, like, what she's... Again, I think she just remembers selectively, or she just doesn't think to think about what to remember. And that's just so mind-blowing. But I like that Fern just accepts the hairbreadth and she thinks it's pretty and she likes it a lot. And she's like, you're hopelessly dense, so let me be clear. I'm overjoyed that you tried to get to know me. I really like that. I like that Fern doesn't get upset at Frieren for not noticing or not being observant or being different in how she interacts. I like that Fern is never judgmental of her. She questions it, but she never, like, gets mad at her about it. She just says, I'm going to tell you and be blunt. So are you listening? And she's like, I'm happy that you tried to get to know me. Like, the way she explains it, it's really sweet. I like it. I like it a lot. A lot indeed. She's like, and it's because you tried. And again, so they go on their way. And also, I wonder how much of Frieren's mind has kind of been preoccupied by things like the mission they go on in this episode, because that's a pretty scary thing. There's this sage that could hurt a lot of people, and she's like, I have to kill him. And so, you know, that would be kind of taking up a lot of space in my mind. If I were in the same boat, I'd probably be thinking about that a lot. Don't know if I'd be sleeping the night before I had to go do such a thing, because you don't know how it's going to turn out. And it gets explained why she's okay with doing it alone against him. We get to that point here in a little bit. But I'm wondering if there's other side quests like the sage that was sealed in this episode. If there's other side quests like him that she's taking Fern with her to go on. And I wonder if that's one of the reasons she told Heater, she's like, I can't have a mage that can't defend themselves with me. We're going to be doing some scary things. And now this episode, it makes sense because Fern had to defend herself, otherwise she'd be killed. So, I mean, I'm curious to see what Frieren has in mind for the rest of their journey, because Fern asks what the whole purpose of it is. And she's like, I'm just satisfying my desire to collect spells. There's nothing particular about it, but whenever I can, I want to retrace the adventures I had with Himmel and the others before all sign of them fades away. Yeah, and again, that's really important to her because Fern's like, you don't want to forget them, right? And she's like, no, obviously not. And because that's when she goes, well, I don't know. I'm trying to figure that out. That's interesting. And that's what kind of got me on the whole neurodivergency with Frieren, because Fern's like, well, if you're trying to retrace your steps and you're trying to remember these people that, you know, that you traveled with, that means that you loved them and they're important and you don't want to forget about them. And Frieren's like, maybe, we'll see. And I'm like, no, that's it, girl. But Fern is nice and is just gonna let it work itself out. Fern is a saint. She's a little young apprentice mage who's like, well, we'll let Big Sis figure it out, you know. And I thought it was interesting that she's like, I could be your older sister, and I feel like at that point, what's interesting is that poor Frieren, she like looks over to Fern, and Fern is like, she's gotten taller, she's filled out. She's got bigger breasts than Frieren, and Frieren's like, well, but we eat the same. And I'm like, genetics, girl. It can be a thing, right? Oh my gosh, poor Frieren. She's like, but Himmel loved you either way. Himmel loved you more than anybody, so who cares, right? That's the thing. I kind of am like, I don't know if Frieren has necessarily said she loves Himmel, or she recognized how important he was, but I can't see her moving on from Himmel. That's kind of the weird thing, right? Maybe that green-haired elf. We'll see. I'm like, girl, you need to find yourself a boyfriend that's going to be an elf that is going to live as long as you do. That'd be the way to go. But I don't see a lot of elves in this world, so I don't feel like that's something that happens very often, right? Maybe there's not a lot of elves left, or they keep to themselves and hide away because they're powerful. Oh. Anyway, I like the spell that she casts. So we have the 6 flower petals. 3 of them have moons and 3 of them have suns, which is fun. There's all these little runes on them. I love the idea of the defensive spell being like a honeycomb, a catacomb there for the defensive spell, and she shows how to get around it. She also aimed like what seemed like a ZOLTRAAK'D against her, but cut it off at the last second, right? Saying that if you hadn't concentrated your magic, you would have been dead. And it all makes sense why she's been training her defensive spells this whole time, because she wanted to keep her safe. She's like, we're about to go unseal this monster that was a big, a lot of trouble for my crew. And the last thing I want is for you to get hurt. So I got to make sure that you're able to defend yourself before we get to that point. Right? And then I like just the calmness, the sereneness as they travel on the little log. And I like that Frieren just kind of walks across it like it's no big deal. And then Fern has to kind of stumble a little bit and be like, hold on there, Frieren, don't leave me behind. And then they manage to get back. She's like, magic is about theory as much as practice. So yeah, and we'll talk about that theory versus practice later on. But I like that Frieren's like, have you read that book I gave you? I gave you it like months ago. And Fern's like, I haven't gotten it. And then the moment it comes up that it's going to be like something about a battle, Fern's like, I should have read that book. It's like, yes, you should have. So they make it to this little village where the monster, the sage, was sealed. And we see this older man who knew Himmel. And he leads them there. He's a demon who committed terrible atrocities in the region 80 years ago. And he's the monster we saw, I'm pretty sure, in episode 2 where Himmel like stood in front with a sword to rescue the girl. Pretty sure that was the case, maybe. Maybe. Before being sealed by Himmel the hero and his party. Yeah, Himmel's the one that's got all the recognition, that came back and did the campaigning and people knew him, even though Frieren and the others likely played a major role in sealing it. And they've killed the Demon King. So the Demon King is in fact dead, not sealed away. That's good to know. At first I was like, oh, they had to seal this guy away, but they could kill the Demon King. But it could be like, in a chess game, the king piece is actually not that strong. He can't really do as much as like, say, the queen, or the knight or the bishop. So it could be one of those things that once this demon was sealed away, once all of the lackeys of the king were out of the picture, the king really probably didn't put up maybe much of a fight. Now, I don't know. We might get a little flashback to that and be like, oh no, it was actually a really horrible battle, and be like, oh, never mind. But I don't know. And she's like, I've come here to defeat him because the seal is going to break. And she's like, how do you know? And he's like, well, Himmel came every year to check on the seal. And she's like, he was always a softie. And then, again, Angst City. He's like, oh, he used to talk about you, saying that you were cold for not visiting. But he's like, but she's not too cold to not come back and make sure the village didn't meet its fate. She'll come when the seal's about to break. I just love that we constantly have Himmel as our reminder of how much faith he had in Frieren. And Frieren's like, okay. Like, she doesn't really know what to do with that information. She just kind of sits there and goes, okay. Because even Fern's like, are you sure that Himmel didn't believe in you? I think that he did. And Fern's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Fern's like, trying to tell you. So we go to Stonehenge, and that's where we see this sage of corruption, right? He looks like the lop-eared Digimon from Digimon the movie. I'm just saying. He looks eerily similar. I think it's the shape of his face. He has like the eyes are really creepy because the eyes are black and they're like sewn halfway shut. They're super creepy. Like, I love his design. He does look a little bit like a Digimon, but I like Digimon, so I'm totally fine with that. Absolutely. So yeah. And so she's like, I'm going to unseal him. The seal's really unstable to begin with. I'm going to unseal him, and Qual's his name, and we're going to take care of him. And so she's like, why didn't you kill him before 80 years ago? And Fern's like, I couldn't. There was no way. He was too powerful. All I could do was seal him away and hope that the seal would last. And the thing about it is that it's not that the seal like had some magic expiration date. She just kind of had an idea of how long the seal would last, and so when she checked it, she's like, yep, it's unstable, it might not last very much longer. But I kind of like that little detail because, in some shonen or something, they'd be like, in 3 years they're gonna bust out, and it's like, no, in this case they literally, he probably could stay there another decade, but she would have moved on to other things. So she's like, while I'm in the area, I might as well take care of it. And I've got a mage that can protect me. That's the thing, too. She probably couldn't have gone and taken care of Qual until she had someone else to put up the shield and distract him to give her time to kill him. So that's fascinating. If she hadn't taken on Fern as an apprentice, would she have been able to stop Qual? That's a really good question. Or that kind of begs the question, if she didn't have an apprentice or someone to help her distract him, would she have even gone there, or would she have risked the spell and seal being unstable a little bit longer until she did? I don't know. It's kind of like a chicken and the egg question. We just don't know for sure. But she explains basically the power of his technique, where he was an exceptional mage and he had the first piercing spell in history called ZOLTRAAK'D, which is interesting. So 80 years ago, it was the first piercing spell, and that was it. And it was really powerful back then. 40% of adventurers and 70% of mages were killed by ZOLTRAAK'D, which sounds terrifying. But then the twist happens, which I love. And she's like, you didn't read the history tome. She's like, you need to read your history book. You need to know, you need to learn from history. That's the whole point of this episode, is about learning from history. And Fern's like, I'll read it now. And she's like, no, do it after our battle. Get sleep first. So then they go and face the mage. And I love that Frieren's like, don't let your guard down. What I love about this confrontation is that when he's like unfrozen, he just kind of like stops, and he doesn't like burst out screaming or having this big moment of like blood curdling bloodlust. He's just like, oh, how long has it been, Frieren? And she's like, 80 years. And he's like, just that? And she's like, just that. It's great. You don't expect it. And then she's like, look, we killed the Demon King. So honestly, killed the Demon King. So I, would imagine if you wanted to talk this out and just leave, you could. But instead he's like, no, I'm gonna avenge him. And he fires the ZOLTRAAK'D, and she blocks it. And that's when he says that defensive spell is quite powerful. And she's like, well, that was just ordinary offensive magic. And this is the twist. And I love this twist so much. And I love that Frieren tells him, she's like, back in the day, your magic was too powerful. It was so powerful that humanity couldn't let it go unnoticed. So the moment you were sealed away and you weren't a threat, people began studying your magic. And they began finding ways to incorporate it into their own, into their own magic, into their own things to use for construction. They found ways to make defensive spells against it. She's like, 80 years is not a long time for us, elves or whatever he is, but for humanity, it's a long time. And it's so nice because it kind of shows there is a desperation to humanity, a desperation for survival, a desperation for advancement, a desperation to explore and know things. And so in that desperation, it kind of defeats the status quo. It causes innovation, what is it? Something breeds innovation. What? I'm going to look up the phrase now because it's going to drive me crazy. What is that phrase? Oh, come on now. Well, there's a phrase that's like, capitalism breeds innovation, but that's not what I wanted. Creativity breeds innovation. Adversity breeds innovation. There we go. I was like finding it on Google. Where's that? But yeah, adversity breeds innovation. It's like when you are hard pressed and something challenges you, humanity wants to push back, and we want to challenge back even harder. So it's like, in war, you start out, you have swords. Well, now we have cannons. Well, now we have, instead of cannons, we have a bazooka. And now we have this. And it's just like we're trying to one-up each other over time. And ZOLTRAAK'D, that was this magical, powerful killing spell. It was like, back then, it was like the bayonet of, it was a bullet back in the day. ZOLTRAAK'D was a bullet. Well, now everybody has bulletproof vests. And now they have, a rocket launcher. So that bullet doesn't mean anything anymore. And I love that. That was such a cool twist. And it was smart. and really clever how they just wove it in. It's like, oh yeah. And I really appreciate the intelligence of that, because it shows the show is smart, and the way that it's considering time. It's like, your Zoltrak is no longer killing magic. It's just ordinary offensive magic. And I love how cold Frieren is. Again, she's in the shadows, and she just says it so coldly, like, you're not going to win in this. And she's like, if you don't resist, I'll make your death painless. And he's like, well, but that defensive magic probably, and he instantly creates it himself, probably consumes a great deal of mana. Like, it took him 10 seconds to figure it out, so he was no dummy, right? But Fern is able to do the distraction like they practiced, and then that's when Frieren comes up above. And I love when she's above him. And now he says, so you can fly. So she was learning, we saw in the first episode, her training herself to levitate and to float. So she's, over the course of 80 years, has been training herself to fly so that she can use Zoltrak herself. And then that's when she says Zoltrak. Now, her laser is infinitely bigger than his, so she clearly has enhanced the magic. Also, she blew a hole through the ledge. Through the ledge where he was sealed, she blew a hole through the earth, and now it's like the door from Game of Thrones, where it's like you look down and it's just a hole that like leads to the ocean, right? The trap door, the moon door. It's like the moon door now. Oh, it's great. It's a great scene. Frieren is not to be messed with. And he's like, you took my spell. And she's like, well, that's that. I love it's just like very quiet, very nonchalant. Just there it is. Whoop, there it is. And we immediately cut to Fern reading the book, reading the history book. Look at her. What gets me is that, again, Frieren has a very selective memory. She doesn't remember a lot. She remembers the hat, and then she remembers, he's like, you're the brat who flipped my skirt up. And I think the only reason she remembers it is because Himmel got so pissed. He's like, I've been trying to do this for ages. How come you get away with it, kid? And she's like, I hate both of you. I just love that's what she remembered. She can't remember that Himmel's favorite food is omelets, but she remembers this one kid that flipped her skirt 80 years ago. Frieren. And she's like, and he's like, well, thanks to you, I can live even longer. He's going to be like in his 90s now. He's like, I'm glad I trusted Himmel's words and waited. And so this part was a little bit sad because Fern was like, you know, they thanked you. You saved the village. And Frieren's like, no, they weren't thanking me. They were thanking Himmel. The people of this village believed in Himmel, not me. And I like that Fern's like, okay, look, I don't really understand this whole angsty relationship you guys did or did not have, but Mr. Himmel, I think, believed in you. And Frieren just kind of has this, you know, kind of blank expression like, really? But then she smiles like, aw. And she's like, what is it? And she says nothing. And then the sunlight comes back out. So that part reminds me a lot of Heaven Official's Blessing. The whole being on the little cart and going out in the sunlight and everything. But I want Frieren to believe that more people believed in her too. Right? Because I don't think she believes it. She only thinks that Himmel was the hero. But Frieren clearly is as well. So that was a really sweet episode. And they go past the grave with a little hat on it. That was super cute. I really liked that. But, a very interesting episode that has like the nice little twist. I like that. I like it. I'm curious now what we're going to be doing. So we got episode 4 coming next. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts down below. Please no spoilers, hints, or clues. But I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yes, I'll be back very soon with more of Frieren Beyond Journey's End. Bye!